It was 3 years and 11 months ago that I stood here in this very same room on the other end, and I introduced my book to the world. And I was asked to do the same talk again today. However, many bits and pieces have been added. Because I am still, at 84, a reference and history room librarian, the first acknowledgement in the book is to library patrons like yourselves, quote, from whom I learned that you can never have enough original source material, that someone, sometime, somewhere needs it. And in my book, you have original source material on the early days of the bus industry and its inspection function. And there is no other resource on this facet of the industry. When I was asked to do my first book talk, I asked one of my librarian friends what it should consist of, and she said, talk about how the book came to be, and then read some selections, and then ask for questions. So, with apologies to those of you who have heard me before, I begin. The book starts out. It was 1946. I was 18, a college graduate, and about to become a spy. How did this book come to be written? Well, in the fall of 2003, I was sitting with a box of things that my grandmother had given me, and one of the items was a 1946 pristine lithograph of Greyhound wartime contributions. I thought this should go into a transportation museum. So I got online and I Googled Greyhound Museum, and I got the brand new Greyhound Museum in Hibbings, Minnesota, the place where the bus industry started in 1916. Online there were color photos of the displays, which set me to thinking what might be in the trunk upstairs, and I rushed up and I dug down to the bottom of that trunk, and there were the forms, the reports, the memorabilia, and a notebook that contained the typed copies of the letters that I had sent home from my 3+ years of working on the road. I took the notebook downstairs and I read through the 384 letters, and then I read through them again. I could not believe that I had done these things, and I had seen the post-war face of life in America. For the letters were about my experiences as a checker for Great Lakes Greyhound and American Bus Lines Burlington Trailways, which took me all over the United States in the years of 1946, 47, 48, and 49. I was going to say that many of you cannot remember back, but I see that there are many young faces in here. Can't remember back to a time when there were no interstates. There was no air conditioning except in theaters. There was no TV. There were no birth control pills. There were no suburbs. And families were really lucky to have one car right after the war. And my letters reflected the people, the prices, and the conditions of a world now long gone. That Sunday at Food Dance, I met with Marcia Myers, who is a Portage librarian that many of you may know, and told her about these letters. And Marcia said, "You've got a book." And that was the start. So next came writing the book, going through the letters for my road activities. I met with our lawyer, John Lorstorfer, who is not here today, because I would thank him if he were, for advice on how to handle the names. And only administrators and one couple's names are real. And then the hard part started. I needed a section that would give readers a picture of the country in 1946. I needed a section that would reveal how I got to the big road, and I needed a section on what happened afterwards. Being so lucky to work here at Kalamazoo Public Library, I got the statistics and a sense of time and place from a 2,000+ viewpoint. But most fun was finding and corresponding with others in the bus industry who had written books of their experiences from the driver's seat. One sent me books and the order in which to read them for this kind of history. And I found that in time, my letters, my book, was the second that had been written in terms of time on the road. Another said that the writing would be the most fun, and he was right. I had many contacts with the Motor Bus Society, who joined the mentoring group and who supplied the bus photos. The bus industry became very interested in having this book come out and were most supportive. I soon found that the biggest collector of bus memorabilia was Jim Lehrer of the Lehrer News Reports. His family in 1946 had had a Kansas mom and pop bus line, which went bankrupt a year later. Reading his 3 books, he wrote one about his folks' experience, he wrote one about when he got his first bus, and he wrote a novel in which he killed me off. Reading his books, I discovered that he had spent his summers at Indian Lake near Vicksburg at his grandfather's church camp, that his folks had had a Kalamazoo pony cruiser bus, and many other references to the Kalamazoo area. Also working here at the Kalamazoo Public Library, I've been very lucky. I had found the obituary for his grandfather when he passed on, and I've been able to send him all the history of the rebuilding of the Nazareth church that his grandfather had started down in Vicksburg. And this last year, I was able to send him some tokens from Indian Trails, which was having their 100th anniversary. And he sent me back a letter and said that at the time he was visiting his grandfather, that he rode Indian Trails from Chicago to Kalamazoo and back. And so I've had many contacts with him, and this emboldened me to send him a copy of the raw manuscript. And I got 2 handwritten notes from him telling me to keep working for publication. So I sent the manuscript off to a university press. It was accepted immediately with the warning that, just like a science paper, it would have to be vetted through a series of readers. The first 2 readers loved it, and I was in 7th heaven. The next reader wanted it entirely rewritten and sent me the various chapter headings that I should use. The editor visited with suggestions, and I cut 7,000 words. I wrote the section about my youth. I elaborated a little more, but not enough for many people, on why I quit. And each time I would do this, more readers now dealt with the new manuscript. The editor visited again and picked out the photographs to use. And finally, after 2.5 years, came the rejection slip. It was too different from their usual publications, and money was getting tight, and they thought they were going to lose money. So it was back to Writer's Market, which led me to try local, which led me to Arbutus Press up in Traverse City. Arbutus Press had previously specialized in travel kinds of things. They also did the big book on Kalamazoo Psychiatric Hospital. But it was about 3 weeks after the Arbutus Press got the manuscript, I had a contract, and the publishing process began. First, the title was changed, and the book went from becoming what I thought was a coming-of-age book to a memoir. Second, I was to move 1 sentence. and start the book off with it. Third, when Susan Bays, my editor and publisher, asked Jim Lair for a blurb, he responded with this, quote, "A few months ago, I declared a moratorium on doing book blurbs because of my current plate-filled life. And then I picked up A Spy on the Bus, and here I am. I loved it all, every word of it. My own bus experiences probably influenced me, but so what? Here's a comment to use in any way, form, or however you wish." And so on the back of the book it says, "There will never be another book like this. There simply could not be another Margean Gladysz, who as a young woman was paid by Greyhound Trailways and other companies to ride buses thousands of miles all over the country in the 1940s. She was there to spot and report back on drunk, stealing, reckless, and nutty bus drivers who should be fired. And it's all in her diary-like letters that she sent home at the time. A Spy on the Bus is a treat and a half, I promise." So I give that to you, you know, as, well, Susan and I almost fainted when we got this. And he never said a word that he had already seen the manuscript, so I think he liked the finished product. A lot of other fun things happen. For example, one Sunday winter afternoon, I got an email and I was told to get online, and there were a bunch of old drivers in a series of emails back and forth attempting to come up with the location and run of the Greyhound bus that's pictured on the cover. They eventually decided that that was Dayton, Ohio, on the corner of Main and Monument. And one of the fellows stressed his points in red, and he included a schedule from his antique schedule collection to prove his point. They also debated whether the bus was a repainted one from when Greyhound bought out C&LE, and I happen to know that that was right. So these have been just some of the diverse people who became my cheering section on the way to print. The section on my growing up to getting into this very unusual occupation revolved around the roads in my life. And the working title of the book that I had always wanted was A Bus Life, Growing Up on the Road, because it really did represent my youth in a male-only world. So the book presents not only my inspection experiences, but increased responsibilities as I did surveys, I did divisional reports, I did spying reports on companies that Mr. Burley, the president, wished to purchase. I told you that the bus industry started in 1916 in Hibbings, and so there were lots of little bus lines that were developed after that point in localities. And Great Lakes Greyhound that was here was put together by Mr. Burley from, I think, 5 of these smaller bus lines. And so he was always buying them. So I would be sent down to look at the bus line and come up with what the rolling stock was like and my opinion and so on and so forth. And then I would call the president of the company and tell him that I was a college student and I needed to write a report on bus companies, and could I come in and interview him? And of course they always said yes, because they were very proud of their companies. And so I would go in and I would write a report, and when Mr. Burley came to dicker with him, he had all this background information. I am so ashamed of that part of my past. So anyway, I did these reports and other kinds of reporting that men couldn't do because they would stand out too much. And all of this was reported back in the letters to my folks on a farm in Galesburg, 10 miles from here. I'm going to read a short selection from March 28th, 1947. And I'm, excuse me, I'm writing from Hotel Carlson in Sudbury, Ontario, Canada. And I start out, dear ones, the end of a very exciting day. The end of the first month after my 19th birthday. What an adventure today. Listen. We left North Bay at 1:30 p.m. bound for Sudbury, and about 20 minutes out, our motor blew a gasket. Anyway, it stopped and wouldn't start, only rumbled like 411 parts had broken, and this the first run for our reconditioned motor. 3 men, an Indian, a banana inspector, and a machinery salesman, and myself were on. Does anyone want to ride or walk back to North Bay? We all elected to stay. The driver left. Little did I realize that it would be 3 long hours before I saw his charming face again. I got out my embroidery. The men got out a bottle. The coach got colder. The men got mellower. As the conversation became friendly, I put on my British freeze, and the atmosphere chilled. Having little else to do but think and let my imagination run riot, I remembered all of a sudden that I was loaded with money. $35 in Canadian currency, $65 in US, $10 pinned in my bra, and $70 in traveler's checks. What to do? My body might not be found for weeks. In fact, it might not be found at all. So opening my little brown cosmetic box, I stuck in my 2 pocketbooks and I locked it. And after all this stewing and preparation for the end, our driver came back. Having called Mr. Schlafman from North Bay, I knew there was a room waiting for me, so I checked into the Carlson. 15 minutes later, he raps on my door, and we go over the reports to date, which proved satisfactory and complete. After gabbing shop, he leaves for Greyhound League bowling. I make out my current report, and after his bowling was over, we go out to dinner. At a little dump on a back road, all roads in North Ontario are back roads. We have spaghetti and chicken, different and delicious, and more shop talk. Then he has to show me the office here in the garage, me apprehensive every minute that a driver might show up. He has a nice setup and is putting on a 300-mile service north in May. Notice how I immediately segue into my business mode. Then, back to my Canadian home at the Carlson, where I am writing this. Did I say I had an adventurous day? I had a wonderful time. Love, Margean. Many of the runs I was on had a character all their own. So I'm going to read you about what it was like back then to be on one of them. This is the night bus from Louisville. It's famous amongst transportation circles, this night bus from Louisville. Leaving Louisville at 8 p.m. bound for Detroit, it stops in Cincinnati at midnight for a half hour, in Dayton for 10 minutes, and in Bowling Green at 6:20 a.m. for breakfast. You might call it an express. It makes the best time. You might call it the trucker's bus. They compose most of the load. But you'll probably end by calling it night bus from Louisville, like everyone else. It's famous for its passengers. Night after night, it's loaded with haul-away drivers and their girlfriends. Naturally, there are others, the commuters in Kentucky, the businessmen, the distance travelers, but ask any bus driver and he'll say, night bus from Louisville? Hell, we run it to get the haul-aways back to work the next day. What intrigues the occasional traveler is the ritual used in loading, a ritual unique to this run. The haul-aways step up, hand over their tickets, unbutton their coats, and circle around, the driver being free to take into custody any bottle he can see. To make the driver feel that he's done his duty, they let him confiscate 3 or 4 bottles, but there's method to their madness. At Cincinnati, the drivers change and the confiscated bottles are returned. When the ticket and open coat routine are enacted the second time, few bottles are seen, and the party takes its second wind. But this is getting ahead of the story. At Louisville, the Holloways and their girlfriends make for the bleachers or the rear seat and the last three doubles. The girls all look alike, a bleached beef truss that wears slacks when most women were wearing dresses, and are usually headed for jobs slinging hash in Detroit. The fellas are the muscle-bound type, wearing flashy belts and jackets. Alone, just a bunch of lonesome individuals. Together, men, women, and bottles, they set the character of the night bus from Louisville. Assorted giggles, dirty stories, and sounds of kisses float up to the front, while the driver flips on the lights occasionally to keep the situation under control. Sometimes one of them will have a guitar, a harmonica, or an accordion, and after proper liquid stimulation, songs, all sorts of songs drift up. Usually starting with cowboy and close harmony, they move into The Man Who Comes Around, and a huggin' and a chalkin', with bigger and better verses. Of course, sometimes the gang goes maudlin and sings hymns. Reactions of the other passengers to this startling assortment are varied. Straight-laced old women turn up their noses and murmur vulgar. Businessmen get out their private bottles and attempt to persuade their seat companions to become sociable. Gradually, the whole load takes on the friendly air of one big happy family, getting happier by the minutes as the miles click off. If the driver happens to snap on the light about an hour out of Dayton, he'll find almost everyone asleep, with heads cuddled on shoulders, arms wrapped around each other. The bleachers and the rear seats breathe in unison. Little happens the rest of the trip, and the sweepers measure the success of the night bus from Louisville by the number of bottles that roll out. So these are just two experiences in the 138,000 miles I traveled coast to coast and throughout the West and South. 80% of the U.S. roads were unpaved at that time, and usually the paving ended at the city limits. And it wasn't until 1958 that the interstate system started. The roads were dirt, gravel, half brick, paved, and always narrow. In the South, your road could cross creeks without bridges. If you were lucky, there would be white posts to keep you out of deep ditches on both sides of the road. But long before you came to them, you could see the lights of towns in the real clear night air. There were only 147 million people compared to the almost 350 million we have now. It was my real experience that it was a much gentler time. I had many, many adventures on the road, but 60 years later, these are the things that are still with me. What did I learn in my 3 years of growing up on the road from ages 18 through 21? 1, to always be on time, preferably early. I was here at 9. I almost got trapped in the passenger elevator because it wouldn't let me go up to the 3rd floor yet. 2, to always have something to read with me. 3, to know that it will always rain. I have at least 10 umbrellas, 1 here, 2 in the car. So 4, to always wear black. Doesn't show the dirt, and scars and jewelry are lovely. 5, to always have my clothes cleaned and pressed, ready to go. 6, to pack a suitcase and a half hour for 6 weeks out. 7, to talk to people. Everyone has a story. 8, to take a chance with people. John Prater, who was an FBI man, was the one who hired me at 18, changed all my records to show that I was 21 because they shouldn't have hired me, and he was before his time. 9, the most important thing I learned in my almost 100% male world of those 3 years was to have a passion for my work and the world within which it operates. And I must say, I still have a passion for my work here at Kalamazoo Public Library and the world within which it operates. Busmen had a passion for their work, and they loved a listening ear that knew what they were talking about. No matter what level, driver to administrator, they endlessly discussed the nitty-gritty of their work, their frustration points, their buses, other companies, passengers, and especially gossip, which I had. 54 years later, those busmen that I contacted relative to this book were incredibly helpful, supportive, and mentoring, even if I had been that hated creature, a company inspector, a company checker, a company rat. Right after the book came out, I was invited to the spring fling of the bus industry in Hershey, Pennsylvania. I said, do I need to wear a flak jacket? And they assured me no. And it was so funny because the guys all had their stories to tell me. They didn't want my story, they had their stories to tell me. It was wonderful. About the book, the letters of which it is composed were requested by and now reside in the Walter P. Reuther Library of Labor and Urban Affairs at Wayne State University in Detroit. It is the only thing that is available on how companies had that. And I had forms, I had other reports, I had all sorts of things that they could utilize there. Book reviews and editorials appeared in Bus Ride and National Bus Trader, which are the bus industry's trade magazine, and also in Bus Industry, the journal of the International Bus History Association. The book has been used in women's studies at the University of Minnesota, and the book was used for background by IBM's Intelligent Transportation Systems Group, which was preparing to advise bus systems around the world. And finally, questions. Any questions? Yes, sir. Pardon me? Yes, that picture, that's me. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Ann came home recently with a book and read it and let me read it. I taught at Western for 40 years. I was born in Muskegon in 1946. My earliest memories were dominant bus transportation.
Yes.
We used to go to Cedar Springs every
Yeah.
second week.
Yeah.
We thought nothing of it. And
Yeah.
I do not teach U.S. history, or I would have used your book, because there's no clue in those 3 years that I read from you that the auto industry was going to pick up.
Ah.
It seems like the bus industry must have been flying.
We would have 4 buses out of Detroit. We would have, a run, and it would take four buses to transport all of the people that wanted to ride up along the way and clear into Lansing, for example. It was unbelievable. The checkers really, your purpose at that time, you could go out to the side of the road. Remember, these people did not have cars. You would just raise your hand, the bus would stop, and they would pay frequently, very, very frequently, a cash fare. The driver was supposed to issue a cash fare ticket, and if he did not, there was occasion that you could pocket over $100 between Detroit and Kalamazoo here, for example. They were also, the buses after the end of the war were put together really with binder twine. They were always breaking down. And so the companies were very interested in how they were being driven and that kind of thing. So those were some of the main reasons that they had that. They were also very concerned about drinking, and I have a couple occasions in the book where I wrote that you need to send mails up to a certain point and check out a possible drinking position up there. The bus companies were very concerned for their passengers, all of whom had transport. After the automobile industry started putting out cars again, you can see the number of passengers. When you read the statistics, you can just see the passengers go down, the numbers. Yes?
I rode the bus many times between 1943 and 47 from Western up to either Pearson or Sand Lake, north of Grand Rapids. We had to change in Grand Rapids. And among other things in your book, what about the prices? I remember going downtown in Kalamazoo and eating on the stools and prices and
I'm so glad you're asking me about this. I gave this talk at the Beacon Club, and the people that came there were charged $16.95 plus their drinks and so on. So I started off my talk there. On September 8th, 1946, in Clare, Michigan, I had scalloped potatoes, a pork chop, mince pie, for 41 cents. On January 7th, 1948, in Memphis, Tennessee, I had 2 seafood patties, a hot salad, 2 biscuits, sweet potato pie for 50 cents. So times have changed. Yes, sir. The derivation of the word bus? Sir, I do not know. When I get back to work, I can probably look that up. Yes.
Did you have to sit right up in front in order to see if the driver was...
Absolutely. I always, my favorite seats were either the 2 right behind the driver or the 2 that were over here, because I wanted to see what the bus driver was seeing as well as I could. And so yes, I was right up there. Not all the checkers did that, but I always did.
Did they ever get wise to you?
Oh yes, I got turned up a couple of times. One of them was involved with a drinking situation up in the Upper Peninsula, and they reprimanded the driver. There was a big case on that. And another time, after I started working out of Chicago, they had me go over the lines too much, and bus drivers are very intelligent, and when a bunch of reports come in, you know, they put their mind, oh, ha, ha, ha. And so I got turned up there, and oh, I was just really devastated. You know, you always knew you were going to get turned up and all that. And I wrote a big letter to Mr. Burley, and I said, you know, you always know this is going to happen. These are the other kinds of works I can do. And I went back to the office in Chicago. Nobody said anything. Went back out on the road, came back. And I said, what are we going to do about this? And they said, if we don't mind, why should you? Because they wanted the reports on what was happening to passengers at that time. I had one case that I talk about in the book down sort of in the south, very, very, very bad weather, and the driver was just driving way over what he should be doing, and the passengers went up and asked him to slow down, which he did not do. And when I got to the destination, I called and I had him pulled, and he was fired for that. I had names and addresses of passengers so that there were plenty of witnesses. Yeah. I was a farm girl. and maybe most important of all, I needed money. Originally, I took the job, or I applied for the job because I wanted to get money to go to University of Chicago in a geography program, and all of the monies, the scholarships, all of that kind of thing were going to return veterans. And there was just no way that I was going to be able to get in unless I had some money. And I knew, having ridden the bus back and forth to Western from Galesburg, I happened to know that there was this job, and I had hardly been anywhere except Kalamazoo and up to Cadillac. And I thought, oh, I'll at least get out of Michigan. And so I sent a letter over, and I was hired.
That's quite a tribute to a rural school system, though, because you were extremely efficient as a writer. You know, your letters were.
I've always loved to write. Yep, still do. Mm-hmm. And really, if you read behind the lines, you can feel how homesick I was for my folks. I had a wonderful relationship with my father and mother and my brother, and I was very homesick for the farm. And so there's lots of description of what the country was like and what farming was like, and whether pigs had good tails, curls in their tails and stuff like that. Yes. I typed my letters. When I came back and was married, my mother had kept all these letters, and they were all in boxes and in all the envelopes. And I was in a small apartment, and there was no way I was going to be able to keep them. So while I was pregnant for our son, I sat down and I typed them all, and I put them in this notebook, and eventually they went up into the bottom of this trunk with all the other stuff. And really, for 50 years, I never looked at them. I really was most amazed at myself when I read them. And I had never talked with family or friends about what I had done because it was just so out of the purview of anybody. It would have too much explanation. So it was really a part of my past. And in fact, when I went to the accountant and to John Lorstarfer to see, you know, how to handle business aspects of this, and I told them I was a spy, you know, they almost dropped over dead. Oh, such fun. Yes.
I'll say we will keep it as a reference desk and tell you what bus comes from. I think that a lot of our generation probably all speak Latin. Okay, when you define the noun all, it only is in the plural. So when you get down to the ablative, it's for all or for everybody, which would be omnibus. And so they would call it an omnibus, but of course, you know, the generation changed, just dropped the omnibus, so it's a bus.
Uh-huh. Do you want, any other questions?
That's kind of a modern day comparison I can give you that was lots of fun just recently. A few years ago, my daughter was living in Washington, D.C., and we wanted to go up to New York City to visit my sister. And being a poor student at American University at the time, and Mom working 2 jobs to help get her through, we needed to go as cheaply as possible. So we ended up on a Chinese bus that started in Chinatown in Washington, D.C., went to Chinatown in Baltimore, went to Chinatown in Philadelphia, and finally Chinatown in New York City. And a bottle of water was $3. And there was nonstop talking on cell phones, mostly in Chinese, almost all the way. And the bus itself was very clean, very nice, one of the modern new lonely buses. But I did pictures. I'm
Yeah.
sure that
Yeah.
But what was amazing was it was Chinese all
Uh-huh.
the way.
Yeah, back when I was in, everybody rode the bus. You had people with fur coats on. You had people with straps around their suitcases. You just had everybody rode the bus, and everybody drank.
You had to have a
Yeah,
because they were
yeah,
always sold out.
yeah.
So, you know, it's a regional thing.
Mhm.
They're more used to using
Mhm.
transportation.
So I have another question back here.
Hinted that when you left that work, there could be more to the story
Oh,
than what you wrote in this book.
um,
It was quite
what,
rough.
yes.
1:30 in the morning when I hit that.
Yeah, it was a very lonely life. And of course, back in that time, the be-all, end-all of most women was to get married. All of my friends married, and so, children. And here I was, still living out of a suitcase. No boyfriend, never been to a dance, never been out, all those kind of things. And on the road, even like today, you were very circumspect, Always had my gloves on. Not always. But, it was just, I just thought, I got to do something else. Another part of that is, however, Mr. Burley, the buyer of the bus companies, the president by then of American Bus Lines, Burlington Trailways, and American Bus Lines went bankrupt right about this time. He was going to concentrate in city bus lines. He had the Flint lines. He had Grand Rapids lines, and I did the first report on Evansville lines, which he bought. So he was going to concentrate on that, and eventually I believe he ended up with 13. I hated to do city lines. It was out in the rain, in neighborhoods that were not good, and all of those kind of things. And all I could see really with my future was city bus lines. So that was another incentive for me to start life again at 21. Yes, exactly. And not only to Galesburg, but eventually to 52 years in the same house in Galesburg. Yeah. Yes, sir.
You brought back some memories. I served in the Navy in the mid-50s.
Uh-huh.
And I'm from Norfolk, and on a Friday afternoon, the buses would roll out of Norfolk heading for Philadelphia,
Yep.
Washington, Baltimore,
Yep.
and then coming back Sunday night.
Yeah.
It was the only way we could
That's
afford
right.
to get around, really.
That's right. That's the way the country got around back then. I must tell you one more story. When the book came out, McKinsey's on Harrison Street, where I go every morning at 6 o'clock in the morning and have for years and years. Everybody knew that the book was going to come out, and so they wanted to do a book signing there. So I did this book signing from 6 o'clock in the morning until 12, and they supplied donut holes for that time. And the very last person that came in was this Indian Trails driver. And he had on his uniform, and he had his hat on, and his thing, and oh, he looked good. I went like this, I would have told him he was perfect. And we had a wonderful half hour of talking about what it was like on the bus, how you could feel through your butt when something was going wrong with whether you were getting a flat tire, when something was going wrong with the motor. We talked about all of the little things. I had a ball. And so with that, okay.